so that didn't last forever. So that was
Yeah,
a couple of years, and so now, but you ended up back at Goldman, right? So
yeah,
I guess going back to Goldman was next. Is that right? So
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So,
So
so one of the things I learned through the process, and to your point, is how different roles in finance are, and what you think and what you think you want to do when you're in college. So you know when you think about sales and trading, everyone thinks like, oh, like the big trading floor where everyone's just yelling at each other, and kind of like what you see in the movies. And yes, that happens, but then you also have roles like mine, and I'll get into that in a little bit, which are completely different. You wouldn't think that they sit on a trading floor. So it is a very it's a to your point, every single role is very unique. It depends on the bank and depends on your boss. It's so diverse, right? um but going back to your question, so my experience in this fund, it was great. Learned a lot about things that I was at the time very interested in. I wanted to do a little bit more of like research work, and maybe more like investing work, like thinking about companies and etc. and investment decisions. um, that coincided with, so I was there for 2 years. That coincided with one of my former bosses at Goldman, building basically a commodities focused team within the investment banking side of of Goldman. So obviously Goldman for a very long time had natural resources units in investment banking, your chemicals business, like those groups existed in what you call your classic banking roles. But what he was building was a structured commodities group, which basically what we did was look at financing transactions that were linked to the commodity space, that were highly structured, very specific to a special situation, companies that maybe wanted to raise capital in a way different from like your traditional bond or loans, or initial public offerings. So very much like what people call like structured credit or structured transactions. So he was rehiring for that team. We had conversations, and I decided to go back, and I joined him as an associate basically in this bigger team, which basically worked alongside what's also Goldman's infrastructure group, which basically looks at putting together financing packages for railroads and ports and stuff like that, all focused in Latin. So we were focused on the yes, infrastructure and commodity related stuff in natural resources, alongside this group that was focused on more traditional infrastructure assets like power plants, ports, etc.
and then there was one more step to where you are now. Is that right? Um,
Yes. So the other thing I learned is that change in banks and in finance is probably the only constant every year.
yeah,
People
yeah.
move.
This is the norm, right?
Yeah.
The whole moving around.
And I remember when I was an analyst, the first time one of the VPs in the team said that she was leaving. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, no, why? Like, you're doing great work here, and everyone really likes you, and it's just something. It's just the nature of the industry, right? People move around, businesses change, and etc. So my role now hasn't changed. I do the same. I basically cover corporates in the natural resources space in Latin America. My day to day is basically originating those structured credit transactions. But now we're back into the sales and trading division. So to go back to what I was just saying a few minutes ago, when you think about a trading floor, you think about people trading very fast, short term, lots of transactions, volume, your typical movie scene. I sit in that setting, but what I do is complete opposite, right? We're looking at long-term transactions, things that take time to structure, more long-term deals, more of a focus on originating something and putting together something that maybe lasts for a long time. but right next to us, we have the oil traders, we have the rates traders that are, in fact, doing all this, very fast paced work. So it's interesting. That's why I was, and to your point, like about of roles being so diverse, you need to get into one of these banks, meet people, understand yourself, see what you like, what you don't like, what you think you like could be completely different in one bank versus the other. So it's just, you have to be there and network a lot to find your fit.
Yeah. Well, okay. So just shifting gears a little bit. I want to pick on you a little bit now,
Okay.
and also just to let my current 20-year-old students realize that you actually are a human. You are a real person. I think back to the day I met you.
Yeah.
And so I have to tell the story. So I was sitting in my office doing whatever it is I do when I sit in my office. So I was sitting in my office. Door was probably almost closed, but not quite closed, and sort of minding my own business. And there's a knock on the door, and I say, "Come in," and the door opens, and you're standing there, and I don't know, you were what, 19 probably at the time, probably 19 years old, and I had no idea who you were. You had no idea who I was. I think what you did was you just walked into the finance department and looked around and tried to see which door was cracked, and you just went to that one. And so you came in, and you had this dazed look on your face, and I said, "How you doing?" And you just said, I need some help. And I said, "Well, what can I help you with?" And you said, "Well, I'm trying to figure out the difference between accounting and finance because I need to pick a major. Can you help me with that?"
Yeah.
I was just like, "Well, let's talk through this." But from that day forward, I mean, you were a sponge. You were excited. You were ready to learn. You were, I think this was only a couple of years after you. So you left Columbia and realized you didn't have a career in professional basketball, and so
Yeah.
you had to find something else to do. But yeah, and you're just trying to figure out what finance was, and you thought you might want to do it, but you might want to be an accountant. And so personally, I'm thankful that you chose finance. I think for you, it was a good fit, but I just, looking back on that, dude, what were you thinking? I mean, what were you, when you're, I gotta figure out what finance, what were you thinking, and why did you end up, choosing the dark side?
Yeah. No, I owe a lot to you and to that conversation. If you wouldn't have been there that day, I don't know, maybe my career would be completely different. but look, I think that the reason I think why that happened is because I realized, like, I feel like colleges, when you're a sophomore, for instance, you don't necessarily get a lot of exposure to what finance actually is until you pick a major, or you're a junior or a senior, and you start like learning and understanding a little bit more. So I feel like, these interviews that you're doing are extremely helpful I knew it would have been extremely helpful for me when I was a sophomore to see these and get a little bit of a better understanding of what finance is and does, right? And I think I remember you said something like, well, and just to compliment, like I was doing well in my accounting classes. I got it. I thought I could, I see where I could do with that major, but I hadn't had any experience to finance. So I didn't really know. I thought I wanted to do finance, but I didn't really know how that looked like. And I think you said something like, well, why do you like accounting, and what do you want to do with accounting? Do you want to just, do you like accounting, or do you like working in accounting just for the sake of, doing the accounting work? Or do you like the accounting work to make decisions? And that was for me, it was a very quick answer. I said, no, I like the accounting to make decisions. And then you said, like, well, that's it. Then you want to work in finance. Then you want to do finance. And that stuck with me for a very long time, because when I talk with my mentees or with students, I stress how important it is to be good at accounting and understanding accounting. But because it is the basis for a lot of things that you do, everywhere else. For instance, my job at the fund was, you needed to understand accounting. You needed to, be willing to, go grab an annual report and, do a deep dive in a 10K, understand where things are, understand how things flow, and then use that to say, like, back to the Nigerian banks example, like, okay, like now that we've read all all these balance sheets, what does that mean? And what do I want to own? What do I want to invest in? So I think that's what I was thinking. And the way you put it was very helpful for me to like, digest it. And it ultimately ended up being the right thing for me. Absolutely.
So I think what you're saying is, I'm pretty much 100% responsible for everything that's happened to you in the last 7 years, and so we'll just take it. We'll just leave it at that. But Juan, congratulations on all that you're doing, and super proud of you again. And glad that we got to catch up, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you. It's a pleasure speaking, and whatever I can do to help, I'm always available.
All right, take care.